Well, very good evening to you and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101, Thursday evening. And tonight we are going to be dealing with two topics as we've been doing all week. We want to touch tonight on the situation at GCOM. It's been a while since we've had an update from GCOM. You would have seen in the news this week that GCOM's commissioner, Vincent Alexander, has suggested the use of biometrics as a way of cleaning the voters list and ensuring that it becomes credible. It's been a long debate. There have been calls for scrapping the list and doing a new house-to-house registration. That has legal implications. The court has, as you know, ruled that that could not be done unless there is new legislation as regards the compilation of the voters list. Mr. Jagdeo made a proposal, I think a couple of weeks ago, as to how to quote unquote creatively clean the list. That, of course, was opposed by Vincent Alexander and the opposition members, and I think most Guyanese who would have listened to the means by which the vice president wants to clean the list. And as we said, Mr. Alexander, I suppose on behalf of his two colleagues on the Elections Commission, has proposed the use of biometrics. We are going to talk to Mr. Alexander tonight about that. And then later on, we are going to weigh in on the Trevor Benn issue that has been very much front and center of the news. As you know, Mr. Trevor Benn is head of the Guyana Public Service Union, a credit union, and there have been moves to get him off of that position, to remove him from that position. And there was a quote-unquote vote of no confidence in him that has sparked lots of debate across the country. Yesterday, there were demonstrations in front of the Public Service Union, in front of the credit union, and there is also a petition circulating asking for the reinstatement of Mr. Benn. Well, reinstatement is perhaps not the right word, because Mr. Benn was not removed. He has said that he does not recognize the no confidence vote. He was not given a hearing and all of that stuff. We are going to have Mr. Benn here for an extended interview. We are going to find out from him the background to all of this, what has been going on at the credit union, and why they're after him, and who are behind those who are standing in front calling for his removal. We smell something rotten. We smell something rotten, and we're going to get behind that tonight. Welcome, everybody. I see some of you are in place already. Please share the link and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on tonight. We had quite a show last night. For those of you who tuned in, we had a report from Linden, where we saw those pictures of houses being bulldozed in 2022 by the government. It was not a pretty sight. And we are going to be showing you those images intermittently tonight to remind you, because we in Guyana have a way of forgetting too easily. I suppose because we are inundated every day with all these atrocities, these ugliness that we take them in stride and we kind of forget them and just wait for the other one to happen. And I understand that, but we are going to be showing you those images to refresh your memory, your memories as to what kind of Guyana we are living in 56 years after independence from our colonial masters. They bulldoze houses, they bulldoze bodies, they bulldoze human beings. And we did not win our independence to be bulldozed, by our government. If the government is going to bulldoze houses, then what ordinary citizens are permitted to do? We hear about people taking the law into their hands. We read of the robberies. We read of the brazen acts, violence against women, children, men, old people. And there is our government setting this example that it's okay. It's okay to bulldoze houses. Then the choke and rob people will say it's okay to go into houses and rob people and kill people. That is the example our government is setting. We are up against it in Guyana. We must not pretend that all is well. All is not well. Behind all the talk about democracy and oil money and development and all of that, Guyana is a stink place. It's an ugly place. And it has become uglier and uglier over the last 2 years because we have a government in place. It's accountable to no one. It's accountable not to its party members, to its supporters, to the opposition, to the external forces, to civil society. It manipulates the law and then talks about the rule of law. When you have an unaccountable government, you're playing with a lot of trouble because governments, by their very nature, tend to want to be unaccountable. And when you put checks and balances in place, it is to hold them accountable. And when we have a government that is prepared to defy and disregard both the formal and informal checks and balances, then you are playing with trouble. When you have a government that is prepared to take up all the political space in the country because the law and the Constitution do not prevent them from doing so, then we are playing with trouble. We are playing with trouble. When we have a government that wants to control how the voters list, I repeat, when we have a government that wants to control and direct how the voters list must be compiled, when we have a government that wants to control who works and doesn't work at GCOM, when we have a government that wants to control the courts, the police force, the army, then we are in trouble. We are in trouble as a country. We are. And because we are human beings, we're not robots. Because we are human beings, invariably we will act as human beings. And we all know as human beings that when we can't take it no more, in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, we're tired of being tired. When we become tired of being tired, then we will act in ways that are not always consistent with what is politically correct. We have government. Government was created. Government was created to mediate conflict in society, to mediate differences in society. Government was created so that we can have a mechanism by which the conflicts among us as citizens can be mediated. Government was created to look after the welfare of citizens. Government was created to bring peace. Government was created as a good thing. But when government becomes the problem, when government becomes the source of conflict, when government becomes that which government was created to prevent. The philosopher said that mankind in its natural state, if left unchecked, our lives will be short, nasty, and brutish. Government was created to prevent that. But when government becomes the source of nastiness and brutishness, then we are in crisis. And we are in crisis in Guyana. I'm not saying that we have never been in crisis. We've always been in crisis. And we have to be. We are a post-slavery society. We are a post-colonial society. We are a post-indentureship society. And we bring to our independence all of those ugliness and atrocities. But we come to independence not to accelerate those things, but to minimize them, to minimize them, to minimize them. But when our independence brings us to this point where we are at war with our government, or put another way, our government is at war with us. When our government has declared war on this society, then we are once again victims. We are once again victims. We have reached the point in the society where we have gone beyond elections and office. This government has opened the door to the other side, the ugly side. Sisters and brothers, the naked question before us is a question of power. This government has turned power into something that is ugly, something to be used against citizens, something to be played with. And so that struggle has to be joined. Our struggle now is not just a struggle to win an election. Our struggle now is to retain, to win power. If ever that slogan coined by Walter Rodney, people's power, means anything, it means so today. Our struggle now must to reclaim power. And I pledge this program to be part of that struggle. I pledge this program to be a source of that reclamation of power. The PPP has too much power. And we cannot live under a government like that. We cannot. We cannot. So we've got to begin to think big. We've got to begin to think big. Welcome, everyone, to Politics 101. I couldn't start tonight's program without putting my 2 cents in. Before I bring in my first guest for the interview, I want to say too many of us are caught up with slack talk. put boots on the ground. And, you know, we want simple answers to complex problems. In 2 years, this country has changed astronomically. And we have to understand the depth of what we are facing if we are going to fight it. And I urge you to stop that slack talk about boots on the ground and people not doing anything and so on. Human beings are rational beings. And we cannot take away the rationality from people and pretend that we are kings, we are gods. Only we alone are rational. Old people wisdom say 2 morning more. 2 morning more. Right. We're ready now for the first interview. No stranger to our program, Mr. Vincent Alexander, Commissioner at GCOM. That's the capacity speaking on through tonight. Of course, he wears a number of other hats. He's chairman of ITPAD G, chairman of the Burnham Foundation, and so many other things. You know, we are people who have to operate at various levels at the same time. And we have to be because of the multiplicity and of things that converge on us every day. Vincent, good evening.
Good evening to you and viewers.
Thank you so much. We have had you on for quite a while to talk about what's happening in GCOM, but we're interested tonight in the proposal that you have put before GCOM in this ongoing debate as to how can we have a proper voters. And let me ask you the question that I must ask, even if I ask it 1,000,000 times. How important is a credible voters list to an election?
A credible voters list is central to whether an election can be free and fair. Without a credible voters list, we have seen what can occur, that the list can be manipulated, votes can be cast for the dead and those who have migrated, and parties could put claim to victory on the basis of those frauds.
And there you have it in a nutshell. Without a credible voters list, there cannot be a credible election. Remind us, Vincent, what, because house registration was started before the last election, and it was halted because the court made a ruling. Remind us what the court actually said.
Well, the ruling of the court suggests that the register of registrants is a permanent register for which names can only be added and only deleted if a death certificate is provided for the persons whose name one wishes to have deleted. Other than that, irrespective of if people die or migrate, their names continue to be on the list, on the permanent register of registrants. And as a consequence, when we have an election, those names are extracted and are then a part of the voters list, although those persons would have died or might have migrated. The ruling has created a conundrum, and in my view, the ruling sought to be absolute in a situation where relativity was important. What do I mean by that? We have had, prior to that ruling, a situation where periodically we do a completely new registration, starting from ground zero. In other words, we cancel the old register. We do a registration. It can be house to house or it can be office based. And only the persons who are registered during that process and meet the required age of 18 are then extracted to go onto the voters list. So this has been the practice. More specifically, a decision was taken in 2008 that you would do this over a 7-year period. That 7-year period lapsed, and we sought to do it in 2019. In fact, the Parliament voted in 2018, in the 2019's budget, money for the exercise because this was agreed to at the level of GCOM. There was no objection by any party, any commissioner, and this was agreed to at the level of the Parliament because the budget was approved with the sums for the house to house. It was assented to by the president, and therefore the exercise was embarked upon in 2019 in preparation for elections. Then came the objection from those who had agreed that this is not a legal process if it is going to take names off of the list. GCOM had started the exercise, it was aborted, and therefore all of the names which were on the list remained on the list, and the information garnered during the house to house up to the point at which it was aborted was used in relation to those persons who were over the age of 18 for the purposes of change of particulars. If they changed their address or they changed their names, that information was used so that the information from the house to house was used insofar as it facilitated the change of particulars. But the old list remained in place. All of the persons, dead or alive, on that list, over the age of 18, were then extracted onto the voters list. And we saw what became of that during the elections.
And indeed, we saw what became of that over the elections. We ended up with two results in the elections. The court ordered GCOM to use one result to name the government, and we end up in the situation that we end up now, with now, that is creating so many problems. Vice President Jack Dio came up with what he thought was a novel idea of how to clean the list. Vincent, quickly tell us how novel that idea is.
There's nothing novel, there's nothing new, there's nothing different about his idea. And so for me, the more things change, the more they remain the same. The current regime in GCOM provides for the Registrar of Births and Deaths to supply GCOM on a monthly basis with the names of the persons whose deaths would have been registered. GCOM uses that list to flag the register of registrants in a manner that ensures that when we're extracting names for a voters list, that the names which are flagged because they were reported to be names of persons whose deaths were registered are not included on the voters list. Jagdu has suggested absolutely nothing new and absolutely nothing different. Suffice to say that he says we should do it annually, but it is presently done on a periodic basis, monthly. He also said information should be shared with political parties and made public. That does not make a difference to anything because basically what you're sharing is what is already being done and what is already in the domain of GCOM. So his proposition, in fact, is to retain the current situation so that persons who would have died and whose deaths would not have been registered continue to be on the list, and persons who would have gone overseas and would not have returned to the country, their names would have continued to be in the list. Our legal regime did not did not anticipate that at all. Our legal regime, by virtue of one, removing registered dead persons, and on the other hand, the proposition in the regulations of the National Registration Act, which regulations provided for the chief immigration officer on a periodic basis to make available to GCOM the names of the persons who would have migrated and not returned, so that the chief registration officer could then deal with those names in relation to a voters list. That is what the law provided for. So clearly, our law anticipated these problems, and where the judge failed to recognize our reality is that the said law provided for a mechanism for if someone's name was taken off of the list, for that person, if he or she came to Guyana, to present himself and to be re-included on the list, so that our law does not provide for persons who are eligible to be taken off of the list in the manner in which the judge suggests is the case, because the law has a mechanism which says if the chief immigration officer reports you out of the country, and if the chief elections officer takes your name off, and you return to the country, then you're in a position to exercise your franchise. You have a mechanism that you can go and have your name included by presenting yourself physically. And similarly, we have a process of claims and objections, which process occurs during the preparation for elections, which provides for anyone whose name has been excluded, even if he or she was not registered, to make a claim to be included on the list. So in my view, the judge did not take the entire architecture of our law into consideration and therefore erred in her judgment, because if she had done otherwise, that would not have meant that those persons whom she is trying to protect would not have had an opportunity to have their names included on the list. So from that perspective, I am of the view that there is still the possibility of constitutional and legislative amendments to correct the situation which has been created by her judgment. Her judgment
Yes.
is flawed, it is illogical, it is absolute in terms of an interpretation of one aspect of our
Yeah.
law rather than an interpretation of the various pieces of legislation, including that piece which says that if your name is taken off and you're overseas, you can't vote from overseas, and you return to Guyana, then either on the claims and objections or through a process of presenting yourself to the relevant officials, you may be re-included on the list. So that judgment is flawed, and I think that can be corrected by legislative action, but there has been no attempt to do that, notwithstanding the contention of those who are talking about the reform of RUPA, the Representative of the People's Act. That is not included in the reform. So that mischief, which was recognized, which was being addressed periodically by new registration, has now been carved into our architecture of election preparation in a manner that would allow persons whose names have been not taken off because they are dead or they are migrated to remain on the list and to have those names manipulated. The further point which we need to make in relation to the persons overseas is that thousands of Guyanese who would have been home at the time of registration and would have proudly registered would have since died overseas over a period of 8 years plus. They would have died. And their names are still in the list, and there's no mechanism in our law for us to access those names of persons who died overseas and to have them taken off of the list. That's a fact. And therefore, some mechanism has to be put in place to deal with that gap, that flaw in our registration process if those names are to remain. Similarly, I should emphasize that if somebody dies in Guyana and the relatives of the deceased do not register the death, and people only register a death when it's in their interest to do so to deal with matters of the will and transfer of property. So many people who die even here, the death is not registered and they remain on the list. And therefore, the system as it is, and what Jagdeo proposed, is to retain all of that baggage on our list. And we know that when that baggage is retained, the kind of mischief that can occur because there is official evidence from the requisite statutory bodies in this country to show that at the elections, the last elections, that there were persons whose who would have died and even may have had the death registered who were voted for. And because there would have been a gap between the period when the General Registrar's Office would have sent to GCOM the list of the registered dead, there's a gap between that and when the actual elections occur. So even some of the people who were registered, their names would have been retained in the list because the submission from the registrar's office would have come at a time when their registration might not have been done or they might not have died, and therefore they would have been retained pending a subsequent exclusion, but which exclusion would have come after the election. So what Jagdeo is proposing, there's absolutely nothing new about it. There's nothing novel about it. It's in fact an attempt to perpetuate a system in which dead people can remain in the list, people overseas can remain in the list, and as a consequence, the occurrences of the last elections can reoccur with the attempt to vote for such people.
Vincent, thanks for that lengthy explanation. It was needed because these matters are not fast food matters. These matters are matters that we have to understand the step-by-step developments. And I think your explanation of the ruling by the Honorable Chief Justice really touches the spot. In effect, what the ruling has done is that in the process of saving people who should be on the list of registrants, it has created what we call a conundrum in that it has opened the door for all kinds of seriatums, as my people in our generation used to say, when it comes to the voters list. Vincent, you have proposed biometrics as one way of dealing with this problem. Explain to us what that is and how it will work.
Let me say, first of all, that whilst I think that this matter can be corrected by constitutional and legislative action, I have to deal with reality.
Yeah.
And reality is that we want to ensure that the seriatums which you refer to do not occur. And so in the circumstance where it is apparent, at least up to this point in time, that we are not going to get a clean list via legislative and constitutional action that ensures that those names do not remain in the list, I am proposing a mechanism that can create a barrier to those names being used during the election process. In our system, when we do registration, we take the fingerprints of the registrants. And the reason why we take the fingerprints is because in the past, we've had circumstances where people have gone to do registration more than once using different names, and sometimes even trying to disguise their persona by whether they cut their beard on one occasion and grow it in the other occasion, so that they acquire two ID cards, two identities, and two opportunities to vote. That's a reality we have confronted by attempting to have people present their fingerprints. And so when we are compiling the list, what we do, we cross-match all of the fingerprints on the system to ensure that there is no duplication of fingerprints and therefore no duplication of individuals being registered and being allowed to vote. So we have that base mechanism. What I'm now suggesting is that in our present circumstance, if anybody is really concerned about ensuring that we don't have people who are dead or not home voting, that we introduce a system at the place of poll where the voter is checked, the voter's fingerprints are checked against those in the system because they are in the system. And once there's a correspondence, a correlation between the person presenting himself on the particular name and his fingerprints correspond with those in the system, the person gets them. But if somebody turns up and when the fingerprints are checked, those are not in the system, then it means notwithstanding what name or picture he or she might present, that he or she is not on the voters list and therefore should not be allowed to vote. And in that way, though we will continue to have a bloated list and a challenge as to how we in fact get a clean list, we will have a barrier to those who in the past and in the future they want to perpetuate the crime of multiple voting. So that's the proposition. Let us have a simple mechanism at the place of poll where your fingerprints are checked against those in the database. Once it's your fingerprint in the database, you're cleared to vote. If it is not, then you've committed a crime and should be dealt with condignly.
What is the response of your fellow commissioners on the other side, those who were nominated by the PPP?
Well, first of all, on the idea that there could be constitutional and legislative changes, they said that is not within the remit of GCOM, and therefore we must leave that to the Parliament. I disagree with that. I know that GCOM itself is not the legislative body, but as a critical stakeholder, GCOM can in fact make recommendations in that regard. They've refused to be party to any such recommendation. They prefer to stay silent and to let the status quo remain. On the question of the biometric proposition, there has been no discussion, no debate, and therefore no comment from them in that regard. What I did at the level of GCOM was to propose that we review our system with specific reference to the conduct of the last elections. Because if things went wrong, then one ought to review the system to see what made it possible for things to go wrong so that you can correct those things. The government claims that it wants to do that. And in wanting to do that, they've come with recommendations. But GCOM's review, which is critical to pinpointing where the problems are, has not been a part of the process of determining what changes are needed. That has not been a part of the process. We have made a submission to GCOM that has not been discussed. Our submission did not simply say, here are the changes required. Our submission in relation to the amendments of the Representation of the People's Act suggested a methodology which ought to be used, including a review of GCOM's systems as one of the bases for determining what changes are required. That has not been discussed, and we were advised that the chairman has forwarded that to the relevant authorities. One commissioner has claimed that she has made her own recommendations in her own right and therefore has no need to be involved in any further discussions at GCOM. Other commissioners have made no recommendations and have made no demand to be in a position to make recommendations. But we have insisted that there is need for an internal discussion. So two things have occurred. One, I have proposed for the review. They have accepted in principle that they should be reviewed, but have placed it on the back burner, saying that the review could be done when we have gotten past or heard matters, which is the preparation for the government elections. How ridiculous is that? Because the review is intended to perfect the system for the local government elections. But they want the old system to remain in place, and heaven knows what they will say after the elections about the review. So they've put the review on the back burner. However, in view of what has occurred recently, at the last the meeting before the last, the chairman recommitted to an internal discussion on Hooper. She recommitted. That recommitment did not eventuate last Tuesday because we did not get to that point in the agenda. So GCOM is still, as a corporate body, to discuss the question of the relevant amendments. That discussion will provide me with an opportunity to formally put on the table the question of biometrics. Though I have already mentioned this in the commission, and I have now mentioned it publicly.
Thank you very much, Vincent Alexander, for bringing us up to date with what's happening there at GCOM. It is very important. GCOM is the hub. GCOM is the institution that is charged with ensuring that we have free elections free from fear, credible elections, and we have to keep an eye on what's happening at GCOM. You know, you have been serving both as a commissioner in GCOM, but also as someone who is a bridge between GCOM and the public, so that we can be made aware of what's happening there. Thank you, Vincent. We hope that we can bring you back after the next 1 or 2 meetings so that you can keep us updated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And Vincent Alexander there bringing us up to date with what's happening at GCOM. We'll now move to, after a very short break, we'll have the other interview tonight with Mr. Trevor Benn, who is being challenged for doing good things. I have done my homework. He's being challenged for doing things, challenged by some of our own people. Something is stink and ugly with what's happening or what they're attempting to do to Trevor Benn. Short break, and then we'll be back. Politics is the heartbeat of a nation. It's not always pleasant, you know. Politics can be very nasty, as we know. But politics is necessary, it's essential. Politics is about who gets what, when, and how. And although it's a nasty thing sometimes, we have to turn it into something that is pleasant. And on Politics 101, we try to do that. We try to engage the issues. We try to ask questions. More than that, we are mobilizing our people because, you know, information and knowledge are essential to a functioning society, to a functioning democracy. Democracy is not just about elections and good governance. It's also about an informed citizen, an informed people. And that's what we do on Politics 101. We try to inform you, but we do so not by just giving raw information. We do so via critical analysis. We ask questions. We locate the present in the past, and we locate the past in the present. We strive to turn Guyana into another kind of society. Our quest at independence is always freedom, and Politics 101 is about that freedom journey. Politics 101 is about that freedom journey. That flag must mean something positive. It must not just mean something that we wave when we want to feel good. That flag is pregnant, very, very pregnant with the possibilities of our people. It is pregnant with the sacrifices of our people. It is pregnant with the right of our people to enjoy a life that is free from poverty, that is free from want, that is free from the violence of the state and the violence that comes from within the society. Above all, that flag must mean freedom. When we said free at last in the words of Martin Luther King, thank God we are free at last. Those words must be given meaning by the flag. We here in Politics 101 strive to make good on that promise of freedom. And that promise of freedom means that we must have access to funds for housing, access to funds to buy that car so that our families will not have to stand on the street corner with little babies. We must have access to funds so that we can send our children for higher education. We must have access to funds to do the things that normal human beings do. Pooling resources together and making them available to all of us is an old tradition. The credit union comes out of that pooling of resources, what we call the box. It's an elevated box, if you will. And you see, while government must do things, we don't always have to depend on government. We don't always have to depend on government, and we have not always depended on government. But whenever our people have sought to use their own resources in pursuit of self-activity and self-emancipation, those who are in power have always tried to take it away from them. Something is stink and ugly at the Guyana Public Service Credit Union. Something is stink there that they're trying to heap on the public servants and by extension on Guyana. The interview tonight, Mr. Trevor Benn, who is in charge of the Guyana Public Service Credit Union. Mr. Benn, good night and welcome for the first time to Politics 101.
Good night, Dr. Hines. It's a pleasure being here with you, and good night to the listening public.
Explain to our viewers what a credit union is and why a credit union is part of the pursuit of self-emancipation.
So in simple language, the credit union is there to support ordinary people. It's where ordinary people get together to save their small bits of resources over time and are able to benefit from those resources by way of loans and other forms of support in times of need. That's it in a nutshell. To say that our people, the less fortunate people in Guyana, have benefited from the credit union over its life here in Guyana The Public Service Cooperative Credit Union is not the only credit union in Guyana. There are many others, but maybe one of the largest is the Guyana Public Service Cooperative Credit Union. And a number of our public servants over the years have told me that they have managed to do all kinds of things because of the Public Service Credit Union when they were not able to do so as a result of other commercial banks. So in simple language, it is there for those people who are left out from the commercial processes.
How long has this credit union been in place, Mr. Benn?
This credit union came into being in 1964. This year, we mark 58 years as a credit union.
58 years as a credit union. And people say that our people can't run anything. 58 years. How long have you been in charge of the credit union there? What's your exact position?
So I became the chair of the interim management committee in 2018. And in 2021, there were elections. The annual general meeting was held after a 10-year hiatus. And I was voted again in as the chair of the committee of management.
Mr. Benn, what are some of the changes that you have been able to preside over since you took over in 2018? The credit union has been there for 58 years. Times have changed, we have moved on, and so forth. And any credible institution must adjust to the changes in the wider society. We now have technology, we now have a whole bunch of other things that are influencing what's happening in the larger society. What are some of the changes that you have been able to shepherd in that credit union that you think is for the better of those who have pooled their money in this endeavor?
So I think one of the biggest achievements since we got there is the bringing down the time it takes for a loan. When we got there in 2018, it took upwards of 3 weeks to get a loan. Today, if you have all of your information in order, you can get a loan on the same day. So any applicant, any member coming in for a loan, once they have all the paperwork, these are the regular loans that we have been given for the last 50 years, would be able to get their loan on the same day that they come to apply. This is so because there was a cumbersome arrangement in place where you had to be able to get the committee of management to sign off on your loan. The committee of management met once a week to review your application. And once they review it, then it goes to the signatories for signing, et cetera, et cetera. It takes a long time for the process to be completed. So when I got there, I felt that we weren't serving the members efficiently. And the once a week application process where it goes to committee was unnecessary. So for funds below a certain amount, I give the power to the manager responsible for credit to make those decisions. The same day that the people come in, if the rules are very clear about how you qualify, the manager must have that responsibility to make that determination whether you fulfill it. And that manager will be held to account if he or she does anything untoward. So because of that, we are now able to issue certain kinds of loans on the same day. I think that's one of the biggest achievements, but also being a members organization, we have been looking for all kinds of ways to give back to our members. So over the last 3 years, we have been having what we call the Christmas promotion, where we have various types of products given out back to our members. Last year, we gave out 10 electric cycles and 1 electric car to members. What we try to do is to make sure the people who benefit from the promotion are those at the bottom, so to speak, of the spectrum. the people who most need it. Some of these people who may not qualify for a loan to buy a car or to buy a motorcycle, for example. Those are the people who we try to offer promotions of that nature to. So those are two things, for example, that I think we have done. I think maybe a third thing that we can highlight is the issuing of $50,000 loans for people during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
During the pandemic, a lot of our members were complaining the prices went up in the market, they were unable to work, many of them lost income over the period, and we said, look, let's give a $50,000 loan, interest-free loan on top of whatever loan you had at the time. We will give you an additional $50,000. In a short space of time, we issue over 3,000 of those loans. You know, and so we recognize that the people really have needs that we have been able to fulfill. And these are stuff that they have not had before. In addition to that, since we got there, one of the first things we did as well is to pay out part dividend to our members. Dividend is only paid after annual general meeting, the full dividend. But we found a way to pay upfront some of it because we knew that we would have had to pay, and we know it's a long time since people would pay, and so I insisted that we make an initial payment to our members of dividend. Our members are very loyal. Most of them are there for 15, 20 years.
Wow.
Yesterday, I met a woman who has been in the credit union for over 40 years. She came out with her walking stick to support the petition signing session yesterday. And so these are people who remain faithful and who, despite the hiatus in dividends sharing and so on over an extended period, they remain focused on saving. You know, every month we don't have to go after people to make their payment and to save. Even those who are no longer in the government system and who remain members, they come to our offices to make payment. We have one of the lowest defaults by members on our loan, one of the very lowest in the country. And it's something we are very proud of because our members recognize that if they don't make their payments, we are not going to be able to offer the support to other members. And so we are very happy about that. So those are some of the things that we have done in the last 4 years.
Well,
There's a long list, but
I can imagine. But those are the ones that really touch the heart of what a credit union is supposed to do, what an institution that is in service of its members are supposed to do. Always looking to see how you can be of service and benefit to your members in ordinary times, but also in times of need. Why then a vote of confidence in someone who is taking these initiatives? Give us a background. Give us a background to lead up to this vote of no confidence.
You know, I read a statement in the press a few days ago, in which I said there could be a number of reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm only speculating. As of today, I still do not know the real reason. But chief among the reasons that I've been hearing is that I wanted to be both the chairperson and the CEO for the organization. Now, let me say that the organization has never had a CEO before. And when we came in as part on the IMC, one of the things that the government did at the time was assign what we call at the time officer in charge. That person remained in place until 2021, and that there was no officer in charge in 2021. And since then, unofficially, I have been carrying out that function, unpaid and unofficial, because I'm there having meetings with the management team, long hours, making sure that things, the organization run properly and so on. And so I said to them last October, I think it was, or August, that, look, maybe we could, for a short period, merge these two positions. And I didn't just take it on myself. I went to the committee and asked them what they thought about it. And immediately they said no. 9 out of the 12 people there said no. And I respected that, their decision. And that was the end of it. I've never brought it up again. And so the fact that that's an issue now is surprising to me, because we dealt with it formally, and it's in the minutes of the November meeting. So anyone can ask for a copy of those minutes and you will see that we dealt with it and it was over. We moved on and we had this position. Since we needed to have a CEO, the decision was taken at the meeting for it to be advertised. It was advertised internally, and it went to, the process went through. We had, I think, 2 or 3 weeks it was advertised for. And at the end of the advertisement, there were 4 or 5 applicants, I believe. And the committee, HR committee that was managing the process, decided to extend it by an additional 2 days. And then there was another applicant. It turned out that that applicant who applied in the extra 2 days is the one who being offered the position. But when the report was submitted on the process, I asked for more details. I wanted to see the notes of the process. When you go for an interview, there must be a sheet to say, this is the questions being asked, these are the points being allocated, this is how the persons answer the question, and this is why I believe that this person is the ideal person for the position.
Yes.
This is the most senior position in this multi-billion-dollar organization, and we have to be absolutely sure that it's the best person we are hiring. So I asked for the notes, and I was rebuffed. I was told that I'm making them feel like I don't trust them and things like that. And they refused to give me any additional information other than just a sheet showing 15 questions that they asked. And so I said, if that's the case, then I don't want to preside over this any further. And I handed the meeting over to the vice chairman and I left. And since then, we did not have another meeting of the committee of management. We did not have another formal meeting of the, well, not formal, but our monthly statutory meeting has not come since. But a number of decisions were taken between then, and the person was appointed, salaries were set, etc., etc. From all indication, neither myself, the vice chairman, or the treasurer was in the loop about these decisions. And nonetheless, they were made and implemented without our knowledge and consent. So
yeah.
Obviously we objected. And then there was another issue that I believe may have contributed to it, is that one member in particular for a long time has been trying to tell us that we should not have elections, annual general meeting. We should try to put it off for the next 3 years. And I keep saying to him, that can't happen. It's against the law. We must, in accordance with the Cooperative Societies Act, we have to have annual general meeting. So I was away in January of this year. And at the meeting, that member was able to get the committee to vote in favor of postponing the annual general meeting. So when I returned in February and I read the minute and we were going through it, matters arising, I made it clear to the meeting that this is a decision that I will honor in the breach because it was illegal. We have to have our annual general meeting. And so they were offended. There was a meeting with the Minister of Labor at which one of the members accused me of being, I think he's a dictator or something like that, because I'm one person who holding up, who insisting on decisions when they make decisions otherwise. So those were 3 among others that I believe could have led to why they treat me the way they did.
Eslyn is asking a number of questions here, and one question she's asking is, who was the HR involved in this exercise in the hiring of the new CEO, of this CEO?
The HR committee. The HR committee. Actually, I had suggested that we have an outside group do the review, the process, interview process, because all of us who sit around that table are very familiar with the staff, and since it was an internal process being done, we didn't advertise it outside of the office. All of us know the people who are likely to apply, and I suggested to them that we should have a team from outside of the credit union interview. And I suggested that maybe we could ask one of the banks, the big banks, to nominate somebody, and we look for other organizations that can possibly help us in that regard. But that was rejected by the team.
When did you learn of, and how did you learn of this no confidence that was supposedly passed against you?
Well, I saw the letter from the CCDO in the press, but through the grapevine, you were hearing stuff like that. In fact, at the meeting of where the no confidence was passed, I was told that one of the members, there were 10 people there, and one of the members who sat at the meeting said to them that they couldn't, it was wrong for them to pass a motion without having given me an opportunity to be heard. One person told them that, and the same gentleman who says that we didn't need to have AGM said that, look, we have the votes, we don't need to speak to him. And they went ahead with the vote. And so that individual who told them that abstained. But what's worse is that there are no minutes of this meeting, written or recorded. We record every meeting. We have tons of tapes on our meetings. And the person who records the meeting was instructed to delete the recording and threaten that if anything gets out, they will deal with that individual. So I don't know why you want to get rid of the record. In fact, that's illegal to get rid of the record.
Right.
You know, but if you ask them, there are no record of that meeting, neither in writing or on our system.
Yes, and lots of people are saying here, Trevor, that once you do an interview, there must be notes that are generated. And I can say I've served on several search committees where I work. I'm presently, I think, on 2 search committees. And once the committee meets, we generate notes, and these are the notes that are sent to the higher authorities who will make the general discussion. And first of all, not to send the notes to the chair of the board. What nonsense is that? There is something stink and ugly that is going on there. What steps have you taken since this thing has come to, before I know you have given interviews to the press and so forth, you've retained a lawyer as you must in these circumstances. What has happened since?
Well, I've been speaking to the members of the credit union. Thousands of people have been reaching out to me. My social media is all lit up with all kinds of comments and suggestions and commendations and so on. And I've been looking at them, and based on what I'm hearing, I've been trying to make suggestions. I've been trying to take steps forward. So one of the things that they have been asking me to do is to organize that petition, which we have. And we have more signatures than we really do need for the type of action that we want to take. But we have been saying to our members, don't stop with the petition. Let's get as many numbers as possible. It doesn't matter that we have reached the number that we require. We need as many signatures as possible to send a stern message. Now, yesterday, a number of the members came out. They came with their own placards, people turned up there with their placard and they made their voice heard. I did not have to speak much because they insisted that they wanted to speak to the media about whatever. And they had that opportunity yesterday. And people are continuing, and I'm hearing that the next meeting is scheduled for Saturday at 10 a.m. At the office, and people are planning to be there as well, from what I'm hearing from many of the members. People seem really incensed by what has happened, and they feel betrayed that an important decision like this they were not consulted. Dr. Hines, you will appreciate that many people, when the election was held, they saw a slate, Trevor Benn and team.
Yes.
It was not some other name and team. It was Trevor Benn and team. So people assume that they are electing Trevor Benn as chairperson. And this part of our, we did not sensitize our members properly about what they're doing. You know, many people felt that it's Trevor Benn. But even just the fact that that's what they felt, I thought that the members on the committee should have at least consulted with them. But this is the challenge of countries like ours, where our laws are so dated. The Cooperative Societies Act was first put together in 1948, amended a couple of times as recent as 1972, I believe was the last time it was amended. But a lot of the things in that act needs to be amended. I know work had started on it prior to 2020. Work had started on amending the act, and a lot of work was put into it. And I believe it's time that some serious attention is paid to it. I know at the credit union, our rules, we are definitely going to have to deal with some of the rules in terms of how people act, etc., going forward. But I would like to encourage our members not to allow this matter to die away. Keep focus on this matter. We don't know where it's heading and why it's happening. It seems nonsensical to most people. They cannot comprehend why it would be happening, but there must be some reason, and there must be some hand, invisible hand, that is promoting this, you know. And I would like to encourage my colleagues. I have no ill will for any of them. I want to encourage them to do the right thing. The members have made it clear. If you look at social media and if you listen to the folks who turned up yesterday, I cannot pick out very many people who agree with what was done. Very few people, and even those that may have made statements in support, the other people came after them about it. So in the majority, people are incensed, and I believe it should count for something. Our committee members should really take a step back and to reassess the decision that they've taken and to act accordingly.
And of course, you mentioned the possibility of a hidden hand. Our people, of course, are never asleep when it comes to these matters, and many here and in other fora have suggested that it is not out of place to believe that our government has some hand in it. The assault of the government on cooperative unions and cooperatives and so on is well known. I wouldn't put you on the spot if you don't want to answer. I'm sure you have heard the suggestion that those who are in power may have something to do with this. Do you want to comment? And if you don't want to comment, that's okay.
Well, I'm watching you, but I don't have enough information about that, so I don't want to speculate publicly. But most of the people that speak to me about this matter have been putting it squarely at the government, and maybe perception sometimes are reality. So that's much I will say in relation to that.
Trevor, you've been around. I mean, you've served in high capacity in our country. You were at Lands and Mines, right?
Lands and Survey.
Lands and Survey, sorry. And you were booted from there when this government came in. You obviously are a targeted person. What lessons can we learn from what is going on right now at the credit union? You know, it's difficult sometimes to draw lessons while things are unfolding. But preliminarily, is there a lesson or two that we can learn from this?
So, as public servants, as people in public life, you must always expect that not everything will go your way, but also doing good, especially in Guyana, could get you into trouble. That's one of the lessons I have learned. I have always tried, wherever I'm placed, to do my level best and to improve it. Atlantic Surveys, for example, when I went there, they were in dire straits financially.
Mm-hmm.
We were a $300 million organization when I got there. We couldn't pay salaries. Staff members were being, salaries were being held up. We had to go and borrow money and so on. And by the time I left there, well, in fact, in 3 years, I moved it from a $300 million to a $1.2 billion organization.
Wow.
A $1.2 billion in 3 years. I built two new buildings, 2 new offices for there. I transformed all of the vehicles. We bought new vehicles. When I got there, some vehicles were 20 years old, you know, and we were spending a lot of money on spare parts and all that kind of thing. I completely changed the fleet, new vehicles and so on. So, and there, I was booted out as well, you know, and we did not have to borrow money for the period that I was there. And again here, we have seen all the changes that has happened for the credit union, and it's still not good enough. So I don't know that it has anything to do with me personally, and people should understand that it's not necessarily about me personally. And again, I could only say about the hidden hand. You may recall also that in 2021, in May, I received a show cause letter why I should not be removed from this position. So it's coming from the CCDO. And this letter again was supported by the CCDO. One of the points we are making in the court on the first show cause letter was that the CCDO did not exhaust all of our options. She did not give me a hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for the second time, she has received a request, which she did from some other sources the first time and acted on. She again received a request from this source, and she acted on it without giving me an hearing. The same issue being discussed almost in the courts at the moment.
In the course of the moment, look, Trevor John has popped us in a direction. He said he's talking about the players here. He's, you know, there's a credit union, it's the government, and he is also reminding us that the union is another actor in this. Where is the union in all of this? The leadership of the union.
Well, if I could only go by what I read the other day in the papers in Starbuck News on one of the articles done on this matter. There were many statements attributed to members of the Guyana Public Service Labor Union, in which they criticized me for a number of things, which was ventilated already, but the papers carried it anyway. You know, last year, for example, the labor union took the credit union and myself to court on the pretext that we failed to do a number of things before the elections, etc., etc. And the court ruled against them because in every case, in every instance that they pointed out to the court, we showed them where they were wrong. And those same issues, they threw back again at Starbuck News, and Starbuck News carry it without even doing a fact check. You know, so there are players in the labor union that remained very bitter that they were removed and they were not voted back in. And so they themselves have reasons to want to see the back of me because they feel like I'm the person who is keeping them from getting a hold back on the institution. So yes, they are playing a role, but there may be others.
So there's obviously some level of autonomy for the credit union, right?
Yes.
From the union.
Yes. So they're two distinct organizations. They're different. And for many years and until recently, people did not know that they were different organizations. People see them because the leadership from both was almost the same for many, many years. So, but they're distinct organizations. One is a credit union and one is a labor union.
Trevor, thanks so much for coming on tonight and to walking us through this issue. Sometimes we get the tail end of the issue, and the background is very important in giving us a sense, a perspective on exactly what is going on. In case people would like to express solidarity with you, is there some place, a number, an email where people can be able to lend their solidarity to you?
So there's an online petition at the moment.
An online petition.
Online petition, which I can share with you, and you could pin to your page so that people can see it and join the petition if they so desire.
Okay. Can you do that now in the private chat? And then the operator can put it up on the screen. Thanks so much to you there. Lots of you are involved in this discussion. We have quite a lot of you are engaged, and this is precisely what I want this show to be a place for informed discussion, to be a place for the kind of analysis that we need in order to deal with the monsters that we are dealing with in government and out of government, a place where we engage the issues. And I noticed that even what you all call them, the trenches, have decreased in their numbers in recent days. And thanks to you all in the audience who have been able to maintain the integrity of the program. I think the trenches come here and they realize that we're not into what they're into. We're not into what they're into. They're into seriousness on this program. And they're not able to deal with that. Tonight, of course, we have dealt with what's happening at GCOM. Now we are dealing with the issue surrounding the Public Service Credit Union and Mr. Benn. And we are going to get that information to you where you can join the online petition. On Monday night, we'll be starting a brand new show on the platform here. It's Day Clean. The old timers will remember Day Clean used to be the newspaper of the WPA. We're starting on Monday evening at this time, 6:30, a new WPA program called Day Clean next Monday. So look out at next Monday at 6:30 for Day Clean. Those of you from the 1970s, 80s, and the 90s would remember Day Clean. Monday night, we start a new program, Day Clean, which is being moderated by Brother Kidaki. And it would be specifically a WPA program, not a Politics 101 program. But it will be in this slot so that the party would be able to weigh in on matters. Mr. Benn, any closing thoughts?
I just want to use the opportunity to thank the members for their love and support during this challenging period. I want to give them the assurance that I'm there to continue to give of my best and to ensure that the focus of the credit union remains on the members and to continue to bring new products for them to be of benefit. So thank you all and good night.
And thank you very much for coming on. I assume you've passed that information over to the operator?
It's in the live chat.
Oh, it's in the live chat. Okay, you've put it in the live chat. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we're checking in with you as the story unfolds. And once you are available, we have you on. Thank you very much, Mr.
You're welcome.
And thank you, the audience, of course, for staying with us. I am extremely proud of our audience. Without you, there's no Politics 101. You're helping us to grow. We've been on now for a year, and we are still moving on and moving forward. It's Thursday night, so I have to bid you a good and restful weekend. Keep on top of the news, because when we come back next week, we're back to the grind. And remember, on Monday night at 6:30, the launch of our new program, Day Clean, the voice of the WPA, speaking on the issues of the day. Monday night, Day Clean, and Tuesday night, we come back to Politics 101. Thank you very much, and good night, and a good weekend. You know, people ask me all the time, why do you do this? Why do you not retire and read books and write fancy academic papers? And I say, yes, that is also important. But what is more important is that I was given an opportunity to read books in the first place, to engage with ideas because of the sacrifices of ordinary people. And so part of scholarship must be given back to the people in the form of public engagement. I see myself as a public scholar, what we call an activist scholar or a scholar activist, who's always trying to use the knowledge that is gained from reading books, from observing people in their communities, in their society, and giving them back, in the words of a UC Guayana, giving them back to the people as a political nourishment, and by extension, cultural nourishment. That's what I'm about. It's about being that public scholar whose work is not just confined to the classroom, but that classroom is extended to the public space. I'm David Allen.